Hello everyone. Today I'm going to make a third part on my How to Know Row guide, and this part is going to be way more specific about stacking, about concepts. So if you haven't watched the first two parts, I highly recommend you to watch them because many of the concepts will rely on the fact that you know the basics of this game mode. So basically, I was watching many qualifiers for the second Euro tournament, and I've noticed many things, and I think I can bring a perspective about how to get better and just eliminate those mistakes. So my first and really important note on the topic is that it's really hard. I know it's really hard to understand why you want to tuck pieces and why you do it on the right side. So I already told you basically, like in earlier parts, that you want to make a stack which is 7 wide because most likely your pieces are going to be 3 wide pieces, which are the T, the J, and the L, and you can skim. And if you have a couple of lines on top of it, which is 6 wide, you can even skim with long bars. So basically, this is the ideal stack for Noro. But many times, something like a T will happen here, and I don't know, for example, like a square, and just imagine that, like, for example, 2J's like this. And your next piece is a long bar. And what I many times see in these types of positions, that you burn and you burn, which is absolutely correct. Those are the correct moves up until a point when you no longer have the chance to burn with a long bar. And most of the times when I see players with a long bar, they will make the move tucking here, and this is a move that is lack of understanding why we are doing the tucking. So basically this move makes zero sense because we have a hole. Can you see that hole here? It's really important that this line, anything that happens in this line is ruined. You can't get this line. No, you can't clear everything above it and clear this line. It's over. This is a line that you don't want to do with anything in this game. This is a dead line. We just can't clear it. So basically, because there is a hole here, the main issue with this line, after like a T or something, that this is a dead line. And because this is a dead line, you don't want to do anything with it. So tucking a long bar here is not beneficial for your stack. It is okay to make this move if you don't have a place for your long bar. But at this stack and in this stack, there is a clear dependency on either an L or a long bar piece. And this is the placement for the long bar. Yes, I know that now you can understand that. And it is much easier that I told you that because this line is not correct, you have to find another line for it. Yeah, that's correct. But the main issue that I think that probably most of the players don't really understand is the fact that, okay, but how can I widen this to be 7 wide? And this is really interesting. Players, if they have something like an S or a Z, they really hesitant. Like placing S or placing Z, they think that these are bad pieces, which is actually not true. These are not even bad pieces or anything. But imagine that they wait for the Z piece and they want to tuck the Z piece here, which is not a bad move at all, or like anything. I don't really want to like trash talk it or anything. This is a really good move, but you have to understand that only the top of the Z is useful to like widen this stack. So basically placing a Z here or placing an O here makes absolutely no difference. Like they are exactly the same in terms of how to widen this, because anyway I don't want to place here anything. So the only like exception is if you want to tuck two Z's, but most of the times they are absolutely the same. So now that we understand that we only want to use the top of the piece here to widen this line, we can like understand that this is a dead line. As I told you, this is a dead line. And no matter what happens here, it's always going to be dead. So making another hole in a line which already has a hole, it's not bad. You can do that because we don't care, because that line is already dead. So putting another hole into it makes no difference. So this was a really, really big thing that I think most players don't really understand. But now, as I told you, that if there is a hole already in a line, you can no longer need to stack perfectly for that line. You can just make another hole, it doesn't matter. So this was the first thing. The second thing that I've realized, that many players, once they don't have a clear stack like this or like anything, they struggle to do is the adjustment for a long bar. And the adjustment for a long bar is a really, really interesting thing. So there are many ways to have a stack at the beginning which is like 4 wide. And it is tough if you have a 4 wide like block, like a rectangle, and you want to clear this. It is really, really hard because players want to wait for a square, and basically that's it. But because with long bars you can clear this, but the long bar won't come on the first piece and not like twice, so you have to like stack and do stuff. I don't know, like something happens here, it doesn't really matter what, and the moment when you don't get the square here, they panic. And oh my god, how to even widen it to like be 7 wide? It's impossible because I don't have pieces to be like 7 wide on the bottom. So they are like, oh, I can't solve this, but actually you can. And this is something really, really like insightful, I guess, that you have to understand that if you have a really big stack going, which is like 4 wide. 4 wide stack is solvable in many ways. So the first way to help with a long bar, so imagine you have a current piece with something like, I don't know, like the S piece, and your next piece is a long bar. Let's just go to the long bar. And now as I speak about this, it is clear for everyone that this is not a bad move, because this is actually going to be with the square, the exact same with the square, but in a different manner. So obviously now as I speak about it, you can place the S here and skim with the long bar, and once that line is like cleared, like imagine this line is cleared, like something like this, it doesn't really matter what happens on your actual stack. This is solvable. This is solvable with, again, if you have the square, you can place it and skim with the long bars. But if you have a J piece, then this is absolutely like easily 7 wide. And the other solution for this one is if you get the square first and you place the long bar for a skim. So it is going to be the same structure like it was before. I'm sorry, I don't really care about the stack. So if you skim it with the long bar, you're just gonna lose like 2 lines out of it. And now not the J piece, but the L piece is going to widen it to be 7 wide. And the second thing that you have to really understand is when to make it 7 wide and when to like leave it to be 6 wide. Because imagine your next piece is an L, like at this position, and your next piece is a square. So this is a really interesting thing. What should you do? Should you burn with this L and place the square here and hope for like something better, or what should you do? So basically your priority in no-row, the first priority is always lines. So if you have a chance without risking too much on your stack, you should always take the lines. The only reason when you skip skim is when you can make your stack more stable. So basically stability comes first, but if your stack is too high and eventually you can do anything else, it's always going to be after like stability, it has to be lines. And even if you talk about stability and we talk about clearing lines, if you have a double setup, the double setup always comes first, always. You can't really gamble for stability if your stack is something like this. So imagine, I just want to like give a brief example. Like this is your stack and something like, I don't know, like this happens. For example, with the square first. Okay, and your next piece is, I mean, your current piece is something, okay, the square was a great example, I guess. So your next piece is a J, and I mean, your current piece is a J, and your next piece is a square. What would you do? Obviously, because you already have two J dependencies on your left, you can't afford yourself to place this J to the really right, because if you place this to the really right, there is no guarantee that you're gonna get these lines. And if you have a double setup, it is really rewarding to take it. So no, you shouldn't place it here. You should just absolutely always take the burns. So the double is always like the biggest thing you can do in no-row, which is really important. So you have to take your lines that you already set up, because it is really important to get lines, because if you have a stable stack and you get really high, then you can't do like stacking anymore because it's too high. I've already talked about this one earlier. If your stack is like this high, you have to like put your pieces to the left, and if you don't get 3 wide pieces, you're just gonna end up losing everything that you were working for really hard. So always you have to keep in mind that doubles are way more than stack stability. So if there is like one line discarding, but you can get a double, always get the double. If it's not about the double, so if like this is the stack, like absolutely this is, and your next piece is the J and then the square comes, you can place the J obviously here because this is a really stable stack. So you are in no harm of shape of like building up, and obviously you are not dependent on J pieces on your left. So that is really important. So the third thing I want to talk about is perfect clears. Perfect clear doesn't necessarily means your whole board, but you have to understand that once you make something like this setup, and your next piece is going to be, I don't know, like a J piece. Okay, so imagine your stack is like clean, but your next piece is a J, and you place here the J. Now you have to understand that you blocked something. You did something not that bad, but you have to understand why. So basically, the point here is that before the LPs, you could make skims with long bars here, as you can see here. But after you place the J, you blocked it, which is not really concerning, but if you have many long bars, this is bad. So you don't want to block your 6 wide stacks. You always want your 6 wide stack to be on top, because if it's on top, you can burn with the long bars. If it's not on top, like in the middle, you can't realistically solve it. And if it's like, I've already talked about this, if it's like too wide, it's not bad, because you can tuck a J here, and then you can take everything with an L, so you can like clear it. But imagine that this doesn't happen, and something like this is the case, and you are forced, I don't know why, somehow you are forced to place it here. You have to understand that in Noro, you have to think about like rectangles, because those lines, when there is like a hole, obviously it's not clearable. So we're gonna think about this big part of the board. This is clearable, and obviously if you want to clear all of them, you have to think about that this is a big rectangle, and you have to think about how to solve it cleanly, like every single one of these minnows have to be filled. So obviously this is something that you have to keep in mind, but also there are some cases when there are no holes, but you can understand that there is a mechanic which is called, at least by me, perfect clears. Is that okay? But this is also a block. Most of the times blocks are three height, sometimes 4 or 5, but most of the times they are like 3 height. And these clears works in a way that there is a perfect clear, because if you count the minnows here, you can see that there are 9 and 3 plus, which is 12. It is dividable with 4. So you can clear this absolutely cleanly if you find a solution, and there exists a solution. The solution goes, obviously there is not many solutions, but after the first piece, this is a flexible solution. So the first piece has to be an S. And now you can see that this is a shape that I've told you that there are 2 solutions for it, even like maybe 3, but I don't really want to talk about that. So the first solution, it is obviously another S and then the L, and it is going to be the same if you do it with a T, because what ends up like happening after you take the T scheme, it's also an L. There is another solution here, which is only the viable solution if it is on the bottom. So imagine that something is being here, so you can place a J here and a square here, and that also works, because we do that on the right anyway with the square and the L piece to build up, and it is going to be just mirrored. So basically that's it. If there is like a floor to do that, it is also fine, but most likely you will need an L piece. And of course you can start with the L piece too, and then what ends up happening is a T piece, and you can clear it. And you have to see that the stack is transforming back, because if you clear these 3 lines, this whole thing, and you move down the stack, obviously what happens, you recreated your 6 wide stack, because once we were blocking it, now as you can see it is no longer blocked, and you can scheme with long bars. So you can basically cover your left, not just for 1 piece, but for like a 3 or 4 piece combination. And this is not exactly the same with the S and the T piece, because with the T piece you have to be a little more careful. So imagine that something like the same happens. Okay, so let me do the exact same setup. So something like this happens, and we place the J here. Now you have to be really careful, because if you place a T here, and you say that, oh, this is the same. You have to understand that with the T there is an extra minnow here and not here. So if you want to make the same block, that block is no longer being from this line but from this line, and we already know that this perfectly is 3 high block. So the third line is going to be the one that is above our current line. So you need an extra long bar here to make this work. But after the long bar, it is essentially the same. So if you have a 7 byte setup after the initial thing here, which is already too high, there is no difference between a T and between an S. I mean, there is, but basically like really little difference. And if there is no setup here, it is absolutely not the same. So you really have to understand this. So how to think about the stack? Now you know that if you have a perfect way of like creating a 7 byte stack, and you have this slope, this is I mean, this doesn't really need to be here. You can have like something like here. So if there is like a 6 wide, then a 7 wide, then I mean a 6 wide setup, then you have a 5 wide setup and a 3 wide setup, and your next piece is a long bar. You should never place the long bar here. Why? Because this is way less stable, and obviously there are much less pieces that is like comfortably placed. I mean, you can comfortably place here. So basically just think about the S piece. You can no longer place an S piece here, because we already mentioned that if you place an S piece somewhere like here, that makes a 3 by hole, and it's most likely not going to happen that you get a square and the J piece too. So you will have to make a hole. Okay. So this is really important, that there are existing perfect clear setups. Like you don't, I mean, you shouldn't really think about for a really big setup for like 5 high setups. They exist. I know a couple of them, but most likely you will need too many pieces to solve them cleanly. You should only think about 3 and 4 high perfect clear setups, because otherwise they are just dependencies and not really good to go for. So my next thing is I mean the next thing I want to talk about is how to like think about your stack. So imagine your stack is already being kind of ruined with a long bar here because I don't know, something happened, and now we have to think what is more likely and how I want to approach this stack. So obviously there are times when we have to go for a plan B, but we always have to have a plan A. And the plan A is a really good solution, like a solution that almost fills all gaps to 7 wide. This is my A chance. My B chance, my B plan, always filling it 6 wide. Because if it's 6 wide for like 1 or 2 lines, it's good. But if it's 6 wide for like 4 lines or 5 lines, it is tough, because you're not gonna get like 5 numbers most of the times. So at this stack, if we think about like in a reverse way, what is remaining here, we can count the minnows again. And if you add up the minnows, this is now 10. So we know for a fact that this is a stack that cannot be filled completely with minnows. So now we have to find a solution which is going to widen this to 7 wide for the most lines and not making a single hole. So it is going to be 7 wide and 6 wide. So the first thing you have to understand, if you have a single minnow like this one here, which is like really important, like this minnow. If it's a single minnow, it means you can only do it with a 7-byte piece. So if you think about that, this is already in column 4, you don't really want to place any 3-byte piece here, because that is going to block everything to the left. So basically only the T piece is like looking like it can work, but it doesn't. Okay, because we already know that if there is a minnow, we need 2 more lines to be filled to absolutely 7-byte, and this is I'm not saying impossible, but the only solution for this is the long bar, an L and a square. And imagine they have to be in order, like the long bar has to be first, because otherwise you can place the square anyway. So you have to get the long bar first and then the square. So this is like out of question, obviously. So we don't want to do this. Okay, so what should we do if we have a 6-wide stack, which is like 1 minnow, and then it's not 6-wide anymore? 99% of the times I want to burn it with the long bar. So my A plan is to burn this with the long bar. And now what I look for, this is good for 2 pieces. The first piece is an L, but I want to avoid this. Obviously, the L piece is not usually a building piece. It's a burning piece. You need the L pieces to burn here. So placing it here, sometimes okay, but I usually recommend to do it if your stack is something like already is widenable to like, I don't know, to like 7-byte. So somewhere like here, the like placing the L here, it's good. But otherwise it's not really. So like here, sorry, like here you don't want to place the L piece, but there is another solution, and this is a 2-piece combination which has to be in order, and the first piece of this combination is the Z piece. And now you see that this is a stack. Imagine that this line has been like burnt, so I don't really care about that one anymore. How do I want to solve this? You have to understand that this is an unstable setup. I say that this is unstable because this stack is never going to appreciate a single long bar in the stack until you have a square, and there is no other solutions to this. So you literally have to get a square first, and then you are going to be fine for long bars. But if you get like 3 long bars here, you are basically fucked. So I recommend this setup to be made not this high of the board, because now there is a chance that you will get like 3 long bars in your next 10 pieces, but no squares. So you have to place the long bars here, and most probably you're just gonna do. So that is not a really good setup, but it is a really good setup if your stack is like lower, for example, like under the 10th line or like something like that. This is a really good setup. This is also a stable setup. So this is not good, not only good for going for PBs, but good for like competitions, because you will eventually get a square and you have like place to place the long bars, and this is fine. So after you place the square, obviously you widen it to 7-byte and you end up happening good. And also imagine that here we couldn't get the long bar, which is sometimes really frustrating, but it is not. You have to understand that I told you that there are setups here. So if there is like a hole and you have an S piece, you can place the S here, but again you have to be really good about this. When can you do this? If your stack is something like this is a stupid move. Why I say that this is a stupid move? Because now if you want to like solve this cleanly, you need an L piece, you need a T piece, and that was 3 high we were already talking about, but because this is also a line, we need 1 more line, so this is a 5-line perfect clear setup. And this is why I told you that you have to like be really careful about making these setups, because yes, they are solvable, but you should only go for these if it's really low on your board. Like here, going for a tuck like this, I'm sorry, it's really stupid. Even if there is like one minnow here, it is still stupid, because what is going to end up happening, most likely you're not gonna clear this. Like most likely. Again, you can, if it's like a 5-white setup, you can use a square and the J piece, which is like fine, so you have more chances, but still this is too high to go for. Like most likely you're gonna abandon everything here. It is a really another story if these lines are not acceptable because there are holes in it already, then it is fine to go for it. But if there are lines below this setup and like lots of lines like this, you should never go for this. So basically it is kind of stupid for no reason. And if you don't go for it, you can like earn these lines in this block, because we already know that this is a deadline, so the block is that is under it. So again, it is really important to have a plan A for a setup, and a plan B, which can be like good otherwise if I have a couple of long bars. So imagine this is the stack. This is a really common stack. What should you do here? So the plan A again is to make it 7 wide, and there is a solution for that, for something like an L piece and something like a long bar. Oh, I'm sorry. But sometimes this is not going to happen and you get an S piece. Where should you place the S piece here? Obviously, if your next piece is an L, you should place it here and take the burn with the L, because you have to prioritize the burning, as I was speaking about earlier. So if you don't clear lines, you're not gonna get lines, and the game is about lines. So if you have perfect setup but you're never gonna clear these, you just lose all your efforts making this really nice stack. So you have to eventually take them. Okay, but imagine I've taken like all of it, and what now? Like these are all being scored, and now there are like a couple of holes. I don't really know, I don't really care, but somehow this is like dead. Like every single line is dead here, and my next piece is an S, and current piece is an S, and my next piece is not an L. If your next piece is not an L and not a long bar, then of course you can place the long bar first here and then wait for the L, but I don't really like it. As I said, that the L piece is prioritizing on burning, not on building. So making this setup is not bad, but most likely if your next piece is a long bar and your current piece is an S piece, you should place the S piece here, because this only made 2 lines, 2 6-wide setup for the long bar. So one is good for the long bar. If your next piece is a long bar, you can already take 1, and you only need like 1 more long bar to clear the next one. So this is absolutely good. So yes, this is something to like keep in mind, that making a 6-wide stack is not bad, and if it's like 1 or 2 lines, it's most likely to be good. But of course, if you can make those pieces for burns on your valve, in your valve, like here, then you should definitely go for it. But if you can't, there is no harm to make like 1, 2 or 3 lines which are like 6 wide. But if you make more, like this can happen really easily, to have like a 4 wide stack, because imagine just alternating L's and J's. Like this is sometimes really frustrating, because you think that this is an L dependency, so you want to place the L here, but most likely you have to understand that this is going to end up resulting you in a 4 wide stack like this. And I'm not saying that a 4 wide stack is bad, but it's much harder to widen it. And now you have to understand the dynamics again. So basically, I've already told you that if you have a stack which is like 4 wide, you can place the square next to it and skim with long bars. That's the best case scenario, but you need squares and long bars. But also you can place square and you can place L on top of it to widen it, because the L and the J piece is good. And you don't need the square first. So basically here, you can place the J piece first and then tuck under the square, which is absolutely fine. It doesn't matter what the piece order is. And in Noro, if you have a setup where the piece order doesn't matter, it's really good because you just factor out like a lot of RNG factor. Eventually you will get them both, but you have to wait for it. So that's one thing. And another thing is to think about your current piece and your next piece. This is really, really, really important. So there are two things here. Imagine your current piece is a long bar, but your next piece is a T. So your current piece is a long bar and your next piece is a T. Most players realize that, oh, long bar is no bueno here because they're gonna like block my 3 wide stack and they're just gonna shove the long bar to the really right. You have to understand that long bars in themselves, they are bad for the stack because they are 4 wide, and I already told you that 4 wide is really hard to like widen it. But if you think about, okay, so eventually this is your setup, because like your default movement for the long bar, because you have no other better places. You don't want to make a 7 wide, I already told you, if there are many other lines below it, because then you're just gonna block the long bars below it. So even if you make a setup, you can't burn it with the long bar, and many times long bars can help out these things. Okay, but again, my piece is a long bar, so I realize that I can't place it to the left. Or can I? And this is the time when you think about your current and your next piece. It is really important to think about these solutions, that this long bar is really good, but this is only really good if you have a T here. So if your next piece is a T, I'm always going for this adjustment, because it is awkward to have it on the right, and also the T is like starting a burning sequence with a T is also awkward, because then you will need JL to like perfectly clear it. But if you start with a J or an L, you have 2 white pieces, like two white pieces anyway, to clear lines anyway. So this is one thing. And also the other thing you can have here, which we were already talking about, if your current piece is an S piece and your next piece is a long bar, again, you don't need, even if there is like a tax scenario, like something like this, you shouldn't place the S here. You should prioritize the clearing of the lines, place it here, and take the burn with the line. Again, what happens if something like this is the scenario? I don't know how would this like ever happen, but like go for a realistic one, and your current piece is a long bar and your next piece is an L piece. What do you want to do? Obviously taking the burn and taking the burn with the L is the best. But imagine if there is like no setup here, something like this. What should you do? Now you have to prioritize clean stacking first. So placing the long bar here and placing the L here is better, because this is going to be like much easier to clear these lines, because if I place the long bar here, that is one line, but then I have no clue how to like widen these lines, because if you place a long bar here, you have to understand that for one line you discarded so much stability from your stack, and this is really important, because if there is like a little bump, even like 2 minus or like 1 minus, you can build on them. But if it's like flat, it's tough to get like anything here. The only solution is basically the what I was talking about, the square and the long bar. Or if you get like I don't know, like an S piece and a long bar. You can also do that, and then just place the J here and you're fine. So this is something you have to really understand, that most of the times you have to think about your current and your next piece in a combination, and this is something many times happening if you have a stack something like at the beginning. So imagine that there is stuff that is going on to be like this, and sorry, like this. I don't know how, but something like, I don't know, like this happens. Okay, this is a really great example, I think. And your current piece is a long bar and your next piece is an L. It is, I think, hard to understand. I mean, not hard, but hard to see probably without many experience, like much experience, to not burn with the long bar. Most of the times, like taking a long bar burn here is like, oh, I can burn, but you have to understand that what ends up happening is a 3 wide gap. And even if you get a long bar here, which is kind of like unlikely, but even if you have it, you have a 3 wide gap, which is never gonna be clearable. But now we know for a fact that I came up with this idea because I wanted to show you that this is a setup which is perfectly fine, and you can clear probably most of the lines here if you tag the long bar here and not taking the bird. Because if you tag the long bar and place the L here, you're gonna clear this line, and what is like behind the stack is absolutely fine. Why is it fine? I mean, if I like clear this line, what is the perfect clearing solution for this one? Okay, you have to understand that there are many, like insanely many. You can literally have like 5 really good solutions here. The first one is obviously like 2 bars and then something like an S or Z and a T, which is like the best. But if you have another L, you can place the other L here, and now you can see why it is so beneficial, because this one Mino here is elevation cheating. For an L, you can take an L burn, and again, this is tough to see if you are not playing many games. You can, if you have like a too high gap, you can literally tuck here 2 pieces. One of them is the J, and after you clear it with an L, you are also perfectly fine. But also you can just tuck a square here, and we already know that there are many setups which are good. This is one of them, because you can have the square and the J perfect clear, and also you can have the TL or the LT perfect clear here, which like all of them fine. So this is a really flexible setup, and most likely you will gonna earn literally all of the lines here. So again, it is really hard to understand the difference here, but you have to understand that sometimes if there is a burn, you have to think about your current and next piece, and if there is a better burning sequence, because this burning sequence is like hard, but the other burning sequence is like good, because it doesn't discard lines. The other one would discard like 1 line pretty much all of the time, and also would like make your stack like 6 wide stacking and 4 wide gap, so no bueno. But this stack is like absolutely fine, because you know that you can place an L here, even if it's like there is a two high gap, not just a 1 high gap. You can basically cut it because the L piece is perfectly fine here. So sometimes it's good to not take a burn with a long bar or not take a burn with an L piece and use it for building, but most of the times it is in perspective with your next piece. If your next piece is not going to give you immediate advantage, not taking a burn, you should taking the burn. So if your next piece is not an L, a T, or like a J piece, most probably you should take the burn with the long bar and not tucking it, because obviously this is kind of unstable to the other one when you take a burn, because you lower the height of your stack. And that's basically it. So I wanted to cover these topics in part 3, and I want to cover one more thing about the openers, and I think that is going to be part 3. So about the openers, I wanted to say that, again, like many times in the qualification part, I've seen players after the tee, they place the tee to the really right or to the really left, and what they end up doing if their next piece is a long bar, that they just tuck the long bar here, and physically it is hurting to see this, because this is a lack of understanding the stacking, why we do the stacking in Noro, and the way we doing the stacking in Noro. We don't do this to like have a like nice thing with like few holes. We do this because we want to get lines, and we understand that if there is a deadline, you can give a billion other holes. It doesn't matter. It is going to end up being a deadline, and you can get all the other 9 minnows. It is much. It is absolutely going to remain dead. It is much better to place the long bar on top of it. And if your next piece is obviously an L piece, a J piece, you always think about piece combinations. So you adjust the long bar, the default placement for an L, almost always. Why you do this? The reason why you do this is the fact that 5 wide stacks are way more easier to widen to be 7 wide. Because if you have a 5 wide stack, imagine, and obviously the long bar is going to make it 5 wide. So if you have a 5 wide stack, I just wanted to like briefly showcase this. So if you have a 5 wide stack like this, it is really easy to widen it to be good for other pieces. So basically a square is always going to be helpful here, obviously, because it is making 7 wide stacking. So like getting squares to a 5 wide stack, it's obviously a really good solution. And also not just that, but if you have a 5 wide stack, there is going to be the solution with the S, and for the overhangs, like S always good, because okay, there is like a 2 wide gap, but this is also a 3 wide stack if we get another and another square. And also sometimes in Noro you can just get a J piece and the square here, and I'm not recommending this, but many times if it's like a low board and you have three wide pieces, you can just widen it to be like a square dependency, and also you can widen this to be a square dependency even with a T, because after you getting the T, and imagine you get a J and a square, again it is a 3 wide, a really good 3 wide well, 7 wide stack, life is good. So eventually we get squares and you can burn. So that's basically it. And about the openers, I'm sorry, I wanted to show you that it is really important to, at least for the openers, to don't be like just laser focused on one thing, because obviously if you have J pieces, you always have to place the J piece to the really right, like almost always, because that is the best piece on the right side to stack. As you can see, there are 2 minnows, which is like perfectly fine on column 10. And also if you have a square, almost always you want to place the square to the really right too. And you always want to make your stack by these principles. And if you have like 2 L's, please don't do the obvious this. This is so tragically bad, I can't even like tell you, because if you have a 6 wide stack and in like row 2, but there is garbage in row 1, it's really hard to clear this, because long bar is not going to help you with here, because long bar is going to flow through this row 2 to row 1. So this is something you have to keep in mind. Don't do this, even if your first piece is like a T and your next piece is the J. Again, if your first piece is the T and your next piece is the J, just do this. Don't go 6 wide. No, never. Literally go here almost always. What happens if your next piece is a long bar? This is again really instructive, I think. You shouldn't place the long bar to the really right, because it is going to kill so much potential from your stack. Imagine if your stack is like 3 wide, like the floor is 3 wide on the top, and you place something like a Z piece here. You see, there are many pieces that can be tucked here. T, S, long bar, good, life is good. But if your initial floor would be like 4 wide, you see, this is this is bad, because only L piece, or maybe long bar or another Z, but okay, this is like really suspicious, because it's 4 wide. I already made an overhang. Much harder to make it to be like 7 wide and like clean stacking. Don't do this. This is bad. So if you have another Z piece at this position, I'm sorry, just place your next Z piece here and like try to make like your stacking better. And also, if there would be a menu here, but if there is no menu, you can just place it here and maybe like try to make it 7 wide with an L piece and then a longer. But what I wanted to say, that if this is the case, like something like this, so sorry, like this, and your next piece is a long bar, where should you place the long bar? Obviously don't tuck it here. That is a really big mistake. That's like the worst thing you can do. This is blocking many solutions for 3 wide pieces here, because if you have a 3 wide piece, you have to understand that the first line is almost always like discarded. Like this is 7 wide, and because there is a hole in row 1, for row 2 any 3 wide piece can burn, because it's on row 2. Like every 3 wide piece has 3 pieces in row 2 and not on the first row. So this is like really good. So now you can understand, if your next piece is a long bar, you should place the long bar here like almost always. Why? Because eventually you will have 3-way pieces, and if that 3-way piece is like a T, you would have no place for a T piece. The T piece is so awkward because it like makes a gap. But if it makes the gap in a line where is like already being holes, you have to understand it's not bad. Whatever. I mean, I've anyway like discard that line, and now it's like good, because I have 2 7 wide lines. Like my stack is 7 wide for 2 lines, so basically like really easy to get these lines. And also a dynamic, when like I'm really high up and I have many lines to be cleared, and my next piece and my next piece is a square, and something like this happens. So I know that I don't have much time, and I don't know, like the stack is like this high and there are holes here. There is a hole, something like this. I don't care. So my current piece is a square. What should I do with the square? You have to understand that there is, and probably not on level 0, because on level 0 maybe you can like reaction time and just tap. But if you are playing with death or something like that, and you shouldn't place the square here. You should just, because you have to understand that the square spawns in the middle and you don't have time going to the really right. You should just hover this piece to like come here. I'm sorry. And then watch your next piece. If your next piece is an L, you can adjust the square here. And if your next piece is J, you can just go here, which is like fine. And if it's like none of them, you're fucked basically anyway, so you don't really care. But because you give yourself a chance for a double, for an easy double, almost always don't go to the really right, like at least even if your stack is like lower like this, something like this. I don't go to the really right with a square. At least I think in the middle for a second. Is my next piece is an L or a J? Because if it is, then I want to burn with it because my stack is high and doubles are really appreciated. And just don't go to the really right. Almost always take the double. So that's basically it. I really hope that this was helpful for all of you, and I will make eventually part 4 about all the openers and opening principles, and I want to make many more, like show up many more setups that are good and you should look for, and bad that you should absolutely avoid. And I think this is going to be it. So part 4 and part 5 will eventually come, but I don't know when. So please be patient, and yeah, that's it. See you next time. Bye.